the type of astrology that I do is evolutionary astrology, which for those of you that are like, oh my God, I want more depth. I want to understand things. Like I'm asking myself these questions, why? And I feel like I'm not getting those answers. That was me. And I really wanted to understand why I was going through certain chapters in my life at a deeper level. Like why did I have to experience the difficulties in my 20s when I'm looking at other people that are in their 20s and they didn't have to go through that? Like, why did I have to experience that? Evolutionary astrology really and truly is about understanding the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of the soul. I'm just very conscious and careful about sensationalizing or glamorizing certain transits or your Saturn return. It drives me
Oh,
nuts
yeah, yeah,
when people are like, oh, your whole life is going to fall apart during your Saturn return.
yeah.
I have countless case studies of people whose life like beautifully came together. It was such a beautiful chapter of maturation for them. I've been watching Uranus Mars when it comes to tracking war and conflict. I've also utilized them for tracking weather patterns, such as like earthquakes and stuff like that. And so when I saw these two coming together early in the year, I put out the idea. I'm like, hey, I'm just putting this out there. There's the potential for there to be a crisis on the table. And that crisis could lead to a major conflict that we're going to be experiencing. And shortly thereafter, a major conflict unfolded.
A big part of why we wanted to do this video was to talk about the upcoming summer transits.
Yeah.
I haven't done any research into this. I wanted to hear it from you for the first time. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about what people can expect this summer.
I've circled July 4th weekend. It's
Mm,
very interesting. This transit of Uranus and Mars, the challenge is Mars does bring aggression and conflict. In the sign of Gemini, it could be in the form of the news or the media or communication breakdowns, communication shut. This could literally be like actual like electrical systems. This could be like the electrical grids. This could be like major things like that. Those are things we want to pay close attention to.
mm,
And so this specific transit, it feels like to me there could be some sort of Uranian shock or disruption or something like this that can unfold. So that's like a weekend where we want to be careful of partying. We want to be careful of firework mistakes. We want to be careful
mm.
of those types of things.
Could that also mean like
Explosions.
an attack on like a certain like a grid system, things like that?
Yes.
Okay, or
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
a
totally.
hack, like hackers or
Totally.
something. Okay.
When was the last time Uranus was in the sign of Gemini? You were looking at the 1940s. What was happening in the 1940s? There was a major disruption on the planet.
How so?
And World War II.
You are already the supreme reality, believing yourself to be this body, which was never
1,000%.
born. It doesn't, you don't have a birth chart, you know? And now I'm not saying that it's not useful. It's useful. I'll still go and get my birth chart read or let, but I use it more as like you say, as a tool, but I don't believe for 1 second that I was born.
And that's such a deep thought that I think right there for anyone listening should contemplate that just idea. Just sit with that. Like write that down and sit with what you're
Mm,
saying because I feel like sometimes we might brush that over, but there's so much depth to what you're saying that I absolutely love it.
mm,
And because if you truly understood fully beyond like the intellect, beyond the mind, who you are, there's so much that you would look at and be like, what's the, there comes this, like, what's the point?
yeah.
Why?
Mhm.
And so the birth chart is a tool that helps us, I feel like, almost initiate that process.
Ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my dad don't extend me on my dividend.
My guest today is Richard James, astrologer, evolutionary guide, and host of Starcast Weekly on Gaia. Richard uses the lens of evolutionary astrology to help us understand the deeper soul contracts behind our chart. And today, he's breaking down how that wisdom can accelerate your path to ascension, plus the summer transits you absolutely need to know about. Stay with us. Richard, welcome, first of all. And
Thank you.
I feel like we just talked for like 10 or 15 minutes before recording, and most of what we said, I was like, yes, oh my God, I wish I was recording that for the podcast, you know?
I know. Yeah, that was such a fun conversation. I wish we did. I wish we had it. It was so much fun.
Because like I've told you, I've had Vedic astrologers on the show before. I think I've had three or four now, some of them multiple times, and I've only ever done for myself over the last 10 years, I think, Vedic readings.
Yeah,
But there was a part of me that was always like, it's only in the last few months where I was like, I really should have a Western astrologer on. I really should, but it has to be the right person. I'll know when I know. There are a lot that, we follow each other on Instagram. I know who they are, but I just never really felt like this was the one that would be the
yeah,
one to talk to. And then when you came to my attention, I just was like, oh yeah, this is the conversation I'm supposed to be having. So maybe we can start with you describing, Vedic versus Western astrology for somebody who's just hearing this for the first time, like tropical versus
it's
sidereal.
sidereal. Yeah,
And then also what you do, which is a very unique thing I had not heard about before Gaia pitched you to me, which was evolutionary astrology. So maybe let's
yeah,
get into those three.
yeah, totally. So what I would say is if we're new, there are well, there are many different vantage points when it comes to astrology. Tropical and sidereal are two different approaches that are going to look at your astrology chart when you're born in two very different ways. One is going to be based, and this is just for a simple understanding because it can get super complicated. And I find that once we start getting into the technicalities about degrees and everything, it gets confusing.
Yeah.
The way that I would describe it is one style is going to be based on the zodiac, whereas one is based on the constellations. It's two completely different approaches. And what that does is there is a shift between our placements in astrology. And so, for an example, with your chart, you're born, I believe it was in your Western chart or your tropical chart, I believe I'm just looking really quick. I think it's a 9-degree Taurus sun. And that would be your Western chart, whereas in your Vedic chart, that would be an Aries sun.
Right.
And that is because of how the tropical chart is utilizing the zodiac, whereas the Vedic charts or the sidereal charts are actually using the constellations, which is different. They are very different. For an example, like you take your phone out right now and you go look at the sky and you get one of those star apps where you can see the
Mhm.
planets, you're going to see that the planets are in different constellations than what some of the Western astrologers are saying.
Which is,
Um,
I think, why I also gravitated always toward Vedic because I thought, well, this is where the stars are now. So I think
yes.
that's why always I didn't even give Western astrology a fair shot, even though
Yeah.
things can be accurate. Like I remember once I had a leak in my house, and my neighbor was like, he's a Western astrologer, and he's like, look, it's exactly in your chart that water and
Yeah.
leakage and malfunctions. So I know that there can be alignments, but I think that's why I was always so resistant. Is I thought, well, shouldn't we be looking at where the stars are right now? And what better
Yeah.
way to confuse people about knowing thyself than to just kind of throw it off a little bit.
And I think that's a big, and I always say this to anyone that's listening. I think we should remain a little bit curious. And if you really are trying to understand thyself, open up and feel into it. Get your Western chart done. Get your Vedic chart done. And there are different Vedic styles depending on what housing system they're using as well. So like
Mm,
there's so much variety, all of which I was telling you this earlier that I really believe the intention behind your chart or the intention for me to sit with your chart is to truly help point your journey at yourself, to understand yourself more deeply, to
mm,
promote more self-inquiry, more contemplative practice about the self to understand the self more deeply. And so the type of astrology that I do is evolutionary astrology, which for those of you that are like, oh my God, I want more depth. I want to understand things. Like I'm asking myself these questions, why? And I feel like I'm not getting those answers. That was me. And I really wanted to understand why I was going through certain chapters in my life at a deeper level. Like why did I have to experience the difficulties in my 20s when I'm looking at other people that are in their 20s and they didn't have to go through that? Like why did I have to experience that? Evolutionary astrology really and truly is about understanding the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of the soul.
mm,
And so the goal of looking at our chart is the idea of understanding where your unconscious desires are. One of the challenges that we go through on the spiritual journey, and I don't want to say challenges in a bad way,
yeah.
but we all have desire. And those desires play out in many different ways. I want a new car, I want a partner, I want children, I want whatever it might be. Those aren't wrong. But when we look at your chart from an evolutionary lens, we can understand where those unconscious desires reside, where those deep security wounds reside, because those dominate a huge part of our life. And the goal is by becoming aware of these parts of ourselves, we are actually becoming more in tune with our, like with consciousness, with source, with the divine. We start to come to this moment where we realize, well, that doesn't make me happy. These things aren't satiating me anymore. What actually satiates me is when I am doing that deeper dive within myself, or I am meditating, or I am going through this process um, to understand more deeply my connection with source, with the divine. And
Mm,
we could see that in someone's chart. You can understand that. And one of the things you were talking about, which I love, is the idea of even transcending the idea of the different levels of consciousness. There's still an implied limitation to that, and it's still keeping you very physical, right?
yeah, yeah. I'll have clients as an energy healer too. Like I'll have clients be like, "Can you muscle test my level of consciousness?" And I used to do it, and now I just
Yeah.
say no. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, because I don't want to distract you. That's a distraction. If I'm at
Bingo.
500 and my wife is at 510, I need to get there. Like they, and then it
Ah,
becomes this like game. And the
yes.
reality is that you are already the supreme reality, believing yourself to be this body, which was never
1,000%.
born. It doesn't. You don't have a birth chart. And now I'm not saying that it's not useful. It's useful. I'll still go and
N-
get my birth chart read or like, but I use it more as like you say, as a tool, but I don't believe for 1 second that I was born.
But, and that's such a deep thought that I think right there, for anyone listening, should contemplate that just idea. Just sit with that. Like write that down and sit with what you're
Mm,
saying, because I feel like sometimes we might brush that over, but there's so much depth to what you're saying that I absolutely love it.
mm,
And because if you truly understood fully beyond like the intellect, beyond the mind, who you are, there's so much that you would look at and be like, what's the, there comes this, like, what's the point?
yeah.
Why?
Mhm,
And so the birth chart is a tool that helps us, I feel like, almost initiate that process to dive deeper. It really, really does. And
mm,
it really depends on how ready we are at a deep soul level. Like, there's nothing wrong if you want to have children and you want to have the nice cars and you want the success. There's nothing wrong with that. And I
exactly.
wouldn't try to change that, or like if that's the path that you've chosen. But I feel like there's a lot of people in this world that feel this way, and they're trying to understand more deeply what that kind of purpose is, and they're trying to figure that out. And I always try to tell them, like, let's just reverse the lens from purpose to going inside purpose and
Yeah.
understanding that.
Yeah, I love what you're saying too, because I think that a lot, I think when people hear it, they might hear that I'm saying, don't do those things. Like let go of
Yeah,
having things, but no, have them all. Like look, Osho had what, like 50 Rolls Royces, whatever.
literally.
It's like do it all, but never believe for a second that this is me or that I am this or that I have this. It's just
Yeah,
this is what's happening. I remember there was a, because you said like, what's the point? There was a moment where even on my whole non-duality experience that I had, and since then, that was like 2 years ago now, or a year and a half maybe. There was only one moment where I was like, I saw something in like a war zone, and I remember I was like crying about it. I was really upset, which was a shock for me because for 2 years at that point, I had just been like, oh, well, that's just what's happening. That's what's happening,
yeah,
right? But for some reason, it hit me, and I was like, why would consciousness, want to experience this? And being claircognizant, my guru said to me, there is no why. Consciousness is just doing consciousness. Things are happening.
mhm,
They're happening spontaneously, like a wildfire might just go burn
yeah,
down this house, but not the one right next door to it. It's just like it's all spontaneous. It's just
hmm,
spontaneous. But your mind wants so badly to understand why and how. But there is no why. It's
yeah,
just happening.
yeah. This is it's unique because when I talk about like the zodiacal wheel, the pressing question of why is a very scorpionic like thing. Scorpio
Mm,
wants to
mm,
understand why, but as we look at our zodiacal wheel as almost like the journey of consciousness, there does come that moment where when we are in the Piscean realm, which would be the totality of consciousness. You're not asking why.
Mm.
It is. It's one. There's no explanation. There's no need for any of everything is dissolved into nothing, a void, nothingness.
Yeah.
And
Which for some
there's
people is scary, right? For me, it was so liberating. Like,
yeah,
wow, I can just like go back, not even go back, because that's the thing is we never left. We just believe that we're not there. But it's like that, it's almost like in that place, you don't even
yeah,
know that you are. That's how peaceful it is. There's not even
to-
you don't even have the awareness that you are. And then you come into a body and you experience I amness, beingness,
yes,
but then there must be a time where your awareness goes back to the truth, which is that I don't even know that I am.
yeah,
And I always tell people trace it back. When did you become aware that you were? At one point, you didn't even know that you were. Suddenly, there was the thought, the awareness, I am, I exist. Trace
yes,
it back,
yes,
you know?
100%. I was sharing this with you. One exercise that I love that is interesting, and I did this at Immersion this year, which is one of Guy's biggest conferences. I talked about the idea of deconditioning, and an exercise that is so good for removing that sort of dynamic is neti neti, which is the idea of thinking about your life. This is a great exercise for anybody. Like when you
Yeah, let's
think
do
of
it.
yourself and how you describe yourself, I want you to think about this. Like I want you to think like if you were to meet somebody and you were to say, "Hi, my name is this." The idea of neti neti is to say not this, not this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to allow yourself to go through this process to be like, well, then how else would I introduce myself? Well, I'm a teacher. And then you have to sit with yourself and you remind yourself, neti neti, not this, not this. I have chills as I'm saying this. You strip away the labels that you have either been told that you are or that you believed and you've taken them on. And as you go through this process of stripping away all of these labels that this world has placed upon us and we've accepted,
Mm.
this is like stripping away the onion layers. So then you get to this moment of what is left? What is left when you strip away all of these layers and you're sitting with what's left, what is? To do that is very uncomfortable because not only are you stripping things away, but you're also having to deal with the ego, which is going to have a very difficult time because these labels that you have for yourself or that you've accepted have become your identity.
Yeah. What if your anxiety, your pain, and stuck patterns aren't in your head, but trapped in your body? In my one on one sessions, I communicate directly with your subconscious to locate and release stored negative emotions, programmed beliefs, and other misalignments layer by layer without having to relive the past or years of therapy. We simply clear that stored energy, and your system can finally let go of what it's been holding onto. If you're ready to feel lighter, more clear, and more like yourself again, book your session through the link in the description.
Right now, Neptune is in Western astrology, Aries. Aries is the I am. It is the constant process of
Mhm.
becoming.
Mhm.
So we have Aries, I am, and Neptune is like, I am who? What? Like, what are you talking about?
Hmm.
It doesn't exist.
I'm
It
glad you
it
brought this
is,
up actually, because I was literally just about to say, like, the interesting thing about Western is that of the development of because they didn't exist, you couldn't see it with the naked eye when the Vedas were written. So
yes.
there is no Uranus, Neptune, and
No,
Plato in that
no.
system. So I love
That's
to hear
something
this
I'm
because
working
this is
on.
all new to me.
Yes. And I'm really trying to like my personal passion right now is finding this beautiful bridge because I think evolutionary astrology, which is rooted for those who are not familiar, evolutionary astrology, one of the founders, his name is Jeffrey Wolf Green, had a dream of Sri Yukteswar, which was the guru for or of
Mahanta
Yogananda.
Yogananda.
And in that dream, Sri Yukteswar came through in Sanskrit. And Jeffrey had no idea never spoke, was not familiar with Sanskrit. And I've been studying it for a while, and for anyone that is new or Sanskrit is not easy.
Yeah.
When I met my teacher, he was like, "You really are in for a tough one, just letting you know."
Yeah.
So for him to receive the information that came through from Sri Yukteswar in a dream and translated that into the evolutionary journey of the soul and consciousness, Jeffrey connected it into astrology. Now, Sri Yukteswar was an astrologer. We know this if you've read Autobiography of a Yogi. This is a conversation
But
that comes
also
up
the
in the
Holy
book.
Science, have you read the Holy?
Yes.
It's such an amazing
Yep.
book too, and it talks about the yugas and the different cycles
Yes.
of creation. Yeah.
Yes. I recommend that to people on their journey. I
Yeah.
just feel like his wisdom is unbelievable. Like I sit with it sometimes and I'm like, just to hear, I wish I could sit and just listen to like one sentence of him because I feel like it really is such a powerful book though. And it's very, very small. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
big, but
small, but it's such a transmission. I mean, the
yes.
the, the knowledge, the information, it's deep.
It's
Yeah.
powerful. And so Jeffrey brought this information into the Western world. Now, as I started to study Vedic astrology, I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, there's a beautiful blend here.
Mm.
There is similarities. Like there's certain things that I love about Vedic astrology, like the cycles and the timing, the Mahadashas. I think it's so interesting how this system works. And I was like, but my obstacle is I feel like they don't work with the transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which in evolutionary astrology would be arguably the most important.
Oh,
Because what happens is, and it's not to say that like I love working with Venus, for an example. I have perspectives on our personal planets that I think aren't often talked about. But with Uranus is the idea of it is known as the Great Awakener or the Liberator or freedom from the known. Like think about that concept of the freedom from the known. It's freedom from everything you've ever known. It's like literally that level of liberation. That's not easy. It is individuating from the system of Saturn.
mhm.
And what
Wait, can you
happens
say a little
is
bit about that, the system of
yeah,
Saturn? Because I don't know if this is correlating to what I've been seeing lately, but a lot about like Saturn worship, and I'm seeing this online a lot about how they say like the elite and all these things. I don't pay
yeah,
much attention, but sometimes it's hard to avoid it when everyone's talking about it in certain circles that that they worship Saturn, like that the elite class that rules the world in secret actually worships Saturn. And I
yeah.
never really went down that rabbit hole, but I'm curious if that's what you are referring to.
No, so a little different, but I mean the idea of worshiping or doing rituals with planets is very common in Vedic practices.
Mm,
Um, and so anyone that has done their Vedic chart, that might come up like, oh, you should do this on a Thursday or you should do this on a
got
Wednesday
it. Okay.
because this is connected to this. But Saturn has so much to do with like the structures and constructs of society. It's like the conditioning of reality prior to Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, it was like Saturn was it. And
Mm.
so there is something about Saturn that represents the system of this conditioned world that we live in. Uranus doesn't give a hoot about any of that. Uranus is going to break all of that open because it's like a crack in the system. And so it's almost like we can look at Saturn as bringing up the ideas of like the consensus and the societal norms and the expectations. This is how you're supposed to be. This is how you're supposed to think. I mean, how many times have I been told doing tarot or doing astrology, they're like, oh, you worship the devil or whatever it might be. Those are the societal constructs of Saturn, whereas Uranus is trying to break out of that.
Oh, I see.
And the reason why this is happening is because Saturn has so much to do with elements of the conditioned consciousness, how the consciousness has been conditioned based upon where you were born, how you were raised, all of those different things. Uranus is going to bring in the opportunity for us to almost imagine if we didn't know any of that. What if all of that conditioning was gone? Who would you be?
Hmm.
It's the process of individuating from that, and it's almost like who would you be if all of that conditioning didn't exist?
Which is interesting that that would be a planet that comes into our awareness,
Yes.
as we come out of the dark ages.
And it's just I actually love working with the planet. I have a very strong Uranus in my chart, and I was always obsessed with the planet for the long since I was a kid. I was like, oh, this is a cool planet. I love it. It's cool. It's unique. It's different. not knowing that as I got older, I was like, oh wow. I was like,
Mm,
that feels like like I had this connection for the purpose of wanting to have these uncomfortable conversations to talk about things and bring this information to light. It's very uncomfortable to do self-inquiry and self-contemplation. And but we need to talk about it. Like there needs to be that momentum towards that because it's almost like in a way, I'm helping myself by helping other people become more aware of
mm.
self-inquiry and self-contemplation because I'm not
Uh,
separate from those that are around me.
yeah.
I did a retreat a while ago. This was a Kriya retreat, actually, Kriya yoga. And it was such a surreal moment for me because the Swami, if you're familiar with practices, a lot of the times when certain Swamis come around, there's this practice where you would either bow to their feet or you would wash their feet or something like this. What was so different for me is that it was the reverse. The
Mm,
Swami wanted to bow to the initiate's feet and then wash their feet.
mm,
And we had an opportunity, and I said, I want to talk to you about that moment. Like, what? And he said, there's oftentimes in our culture, it's so common for us to sit there and have people bow down to us. He's like, but my lesson I want you to take away from this is that I am not separate from you. I want you to see, I want you to be able to see yourself in me, and I want to be able to see myself in you. And something began to shift in my own practices of how I see things. So when I try to talk about certain things like with Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, there's an intention like this with these three planets. That's why they're transpersonal. And I think in Vedic astrology, my intention is I want to find that bridge. And there are Vedic astrologers that are actually integrating these planets now. Um,
yeah.
I've seen it. A lot of softwares as well. Vedic softwares are also including them. Um, I've done a bunch of different Vedic chart readings, and some Vedic astrologers are not familiar with the archetypes. I've had some very familiar with the archetypes. So I do think as the consciousness of the collective and the planet is evolving, I think there is an understanding that if that always existed, it's always been here. They've always, it's not like they just like, one day it's like, oh, they pop. They've always been there. We just weren't aware of them.
Mm. You know, it's interesting. I had a Vedic astrologer once. I was going to this guru who's like a world famous guru. Actually, it was Sadhguru, and
Okay.
I was having like a private conversation with him. So I was flying in order to have this conversation. I was flying to Tennessee, I think is where he is, and um, a very like famous YouTube Vedic astrologer was like, hold on, let me look at your chart before you go. I just want to see where Neptune is because Neptune is cults. And then she
And
was like, oh, okay, you're good to go.
yes, and totally. And you'll see that so many times too, like with Neptune, like it's wild. That's actually a good thing. You can notice that, especially if it's like Neptune and Sag, or if you have something going on in the night. Like you could totally see some unique
Mm,
situations. And whoever that was, kudos to them, because that's definitely something you want to look for. I mean,
yeah.
I've been in those experiences myself where I'm like, this is questionable stuff here. Like, let me see what's going on here.
Yeah.
It
I'm
happens.
so like I just go with the flow. So I wasn't even questioning it. It was her when I told her that I was going that
Ugh.
she was like, hold on, let me look at your chart, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. So it's interesting. I think our transpersonal planets are really important. And when we learn, like for an example, like Pluto is such a loaded topic to even unpack. Um, Jeffrey's first book was called Pluto, and the
Mm,
whole idea was unpacking his transmission of understanding Pluto from the deepest recesses of our unconscious. And I think in many ways, when I do readings, I find that a lot of people that have questions or are coming in, they might be thinking they're coming in for one situation when in
mm,
reality, it's a major transpersonal situation that's unfolding. Many times it's Pluto that is unfolding. It's like those deeper unconscious patterns that truly dominate our life. I mean, Carl Jung has that quote about the idea of becoming conscious of the unconscious. Like that is what this represents for me, is becoming aware of those parts of ourselves. Um, and that helps lead towards that liberation that you're talking about.
wow. So speaking of certain transits,
Yeah.
a big part of why we wanted to do this video was to talk about the upcoming summer transits.
Yeah.
I haven't done any research into this. I wanted to hear it from you for the first time. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about what people can expect this summer.
We have a lot of everyone is feeling the planetary movements from the perspective of, Saturn is now in Aries, Neptune is now in Aries, Uranus is now in Gemini,
Mm,
Pluto is now into Aquarius. Like all of our major planets have transitioned into new signs, and anytime that happens, we feel the uncomfortability. That's what we're all feeling right now, is like we are in the midst of a major initiation. This summer, Jupiter is going to be leaving the sign of Cancer and entering the sign of Leo.
mm,
And so, if you're familiar with your chart, and again, this is the Western approach here, I would encourage you to look at where Leo falls in your chart. A lot of people that I hear tend to look at Jupiter as like good luck,
right.
and I
The
I
guru, the
don't I
teacher, benefic.
yeah, I could see teacher, I could see guru, I could see benefic, but I'm very careful about the word luck
Mm, mm,
because
mm,
I feel like Jupiter can act like a flashlight and can magnify something in our chart that needs to be seen. And
mm.
it's almost like if we have a Jupiter transit that we're going through, it may not always be, rainbows and butterflies. It may be a moment of expansion, but it's expansion in very uncomfortable ways.
I like that you're saying this because in Vedic I'm in currently my Jupiter Mahadasha and my
Okay.
Venus Antardasha. And
Okay.
so everyone's like, "Wow, this is a great period for you." I'm like, "Is it though?"
Uh, you have to,
And
and that's
I
the thing,
have
like,
not felt that. I mean, it's not bad. It's beautiful, it's expansive for sure, but it's been very difficult too.
And that's the thing. It's like we have to understand, like, for an example, with our Mahadashas, like where in our chart is our Jupiter and Venus?
Mm,
What's happening with their relationships? Are they being aspected by other planets? It's like one big thing. And but at the same token, like I'm just very conscious and careful about sensationalizing or glamorizing
hmm.
certain transits. Same token with like Pluto. Oh my goodness, how many or your Saturn return? It drives me
Oh,
nuts
yeah, yeah,
when people are like, "Oh, your whole life is going to fall apart during your Saturn return."
yeah.
I have countless case studies of people whose life, like beautifully came together. It was such a beautiful chapter of maturation for them.
Mm,
So I'm just very conscious, and I like to look at things neutrally in the sense where we know that that expansion could unfold with Jupiter. Within the sign of Leo, one of the things that a lot of people also talk about is the idea of wanting to be seen, wanting to be recognized, wanting to be appreciated. And while there is an element of that within Leo, one of the biggest things that I would encourage people to think about is the idea of how are you self-actualizing in your own life? Like, what does that even mean? How are you showing up in your own world? Leo is a very creative archetype. Leo is about creating solutions that can help through the Aquarius polarity humanity. How can I creatively show up in this world or come up with solutions that I feel like I can help other people around me? And so, one of the things I would encourage us to look at is, well, how am I showing up in my life? Am I projecting my need of validation? One thing that I wrote down in my journal the other day was the idea of self-celebration instead of self-validation. I feel like everyone talks about nowadays. Like you got to look at yourself in the mirror, you got to compliment yourself, you got to do all these things. But there's something really beautiful about self-actualizing and self-celebrating.
mm,
And I feel like this Jupiter transit could be very expansive for those of us that are willing to really sit with that part of ourselves and assess our authenticity, assess how authentic am I being? Do I feel like I'm living in harmony with who I really am? And I feel like this is what Jupiter can bring to the table. What's also happening is that the South Node is entering Leo. And again, this is the Western approach. And so that means the North Node is entering Aquarius. So what we know in evolutionary astrology is that there's a collective pull, that collective pull towards the collective, or towards humanity, or towards each other, our friendships, our social circles, our visions for our future. Where are we going? The South Node at one level can imply what we need to really be conscious of and be aware of where there could be an opportunity to release something or to detach. So there is a opportunity for us to let go of the parts of ourself that are inauthentic, that are not true, that are not in harmony or in sync. that maybe are not contributing to the greater good.
Mm.
I think we're going to notice that there is, if we are not necessarily aware, like the shadow sides of this, this is like a Jupiter in Leo is like a king or queen. It's like that type of an energy. The South Node can exacerbate this for us. We might have situations where we notice that narcissistic energy can be stronger than ever.
Mm.
We might notice these themes. We have to be conscious of our subjective perspectives and our objective perspectives. This
Mm.
is another thing that's going to be showing up for us. And so I look at it like I like to look at the North and the South Node as the pulse of evolution. And I would throw Pluto into the equation well, but just for the summer transits, it's the pulse of evolution. So when you look at your chart, if you're familiar with your chart, look at where Aquarius and Leo are in your chart, and that is where that pulse is unfolding for you, where those opportunities are showing up for deeper growth, deeper transformation, and deeper self-discovery, where I would be doing the self-inquiry, where I would be doing the contemplation work.
So look at where Pluto is in your chart, and that's the area of life that you want to contemplate and look at.
Well, the look at where Leo and Aquarius are,
Yeah.
because that's where Jupiter is going to be, and that's where the North and the South Node are heading. And so those are two areas that are going to be very loud for the next 18 months.
Hmm.
And then Pluto, 100%. I mean, Pluto is something that I never ignore. That's a felt energy where you know when you're going through a Pluto transit because you're going through some significant change.
Mm.
And what does Pluto like the idea of Pluto wanting to expose and strip everything away? The idea of exposing just this idea is exposing the unconscious parts of ourselves that we're not necessarily aware of.
So this is all kind of interpersonal, right? But what about
Yeah.
on a world scale? Is there any predictive aspects to this of what we might be
Yeah.
seeing?
What's interesting is that I've circled July 4th weekend. It's
Mm.
very interesting. Because that weekend we have Uranus conjunct Mars, I apologize, in the sign of Gemini. And back in February of 2026, I believe it was February, I did the reading for Starcast Weekly on Gaia, and what I talked about was one of their Uranus Mars transits. And I've been watching Uranus Mars when it comes to tracking war and conflict. I've also utilized them for tracking weather patterns, such as like earthquakes and stuff like that.
Mm.
And so when I saw these two coming together early in the year, I put out the idea. I'm like, hey, I'm just putting this out there. There's the potential for there to be a crisis on the table. And that crisis could lead to a major conflict that we're going to be experiencing. And shortly thereafter, a major conflict unfolded. And it was like, I want to say almost a day away. I have to look at the dates again off the top of my head. I don't remember, but it was like a day apart from the transit. And I was like, you can't ignore some of these potent transits. And this is one of them. And so I'm not one that wants to spread fear. I'm not one that wants to spread worry, but that is an interesting transit that could lead to greater conflict, greater war.
July
Huge.
4th?
Yeah, the July 4th weekend around that time.
Mm.
I would love, and this is where I had someone ask me today, you know, I hear you, but when will we have peace? And what's happening is that I feel like the path, it's like the journey towards that has so much to do with how much we continually separate ourselves from each other. And we don't still see ourselves as one. This transit of Uranus and Mars, the challenge is Mars does bring aggression and conflict. In the sign of Gemini, it could be in the form of the news or the media or communication breakdowns, communication shut. This could literally be like actual like electrical systems. This could be like the electrical grids. This could be like major things like that. Those are things we want to pay close attention to.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, but it's also the it's like a potential breakdown in something that has to do with communication. But it also, Gemini has so much to do with elements of our perception, of our reality. And I say this because Gemini is gathering a lot of information. Gemini is always gathering. And if you know a Gemini, Geminis love to learn. And so what happens here is all of that learning then becomes how we are going to perceive the world that's around us, our perception. And so this specific transit, it feels like to me there could be some sort of Uranian shock or disruption or something like this that can unfold. So that's like a weekend where we want to be careful of partying. We want to be careful of firework mistakes. We want to be careful
Mm.
of those types of things.
Could that also mean like
Explosions.
an attack on like a certain like a grid system, things like that?
Yes.
Okay, or
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
a
totally.
hack, like hackers or
Totally.
something. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
got
and I
it, got
think
it.
it's just an interesting it's an interesting transit that when I saw it, I'm like, ooh, this is an interesting timeline because I actually have plans that I have to do in June into July, and I'm like, I probably am not going to fly that time. It's hard because it's a
Mm,
holiday weekend.
mhm.
But it's an interesting chapter where you don't Uranus has so much of an unexpected quality to it. Like, did anyone expect that there was going to be a major breakout of conflict earlier in this year? Was that something that was planned? But it was almost like so many people felt like it was shocking to them. That's the Uranian impulse.
Mm.
And that was a Uranus Mars transit. And now we're getting another one. Now this one is a conjunction. So it's a little bit more potent for me.
This is
Um,
interesting because you said Mars and conjunction. Mars is aggression and war and
mhm.
whatever else. Is that the same in both systems, or do the translations also change, like the meanings of the planets?
So, like, are you saying in systems like Vedic and Western?
Yeah, like for example, Venus kind of rules my chart in the Vedic system. It's in the eighth
Yeah,
house of occult and secret knowledge, and Venus loves being in the eighth house. And
yeah.
but does that same meaning go and apply in what you're saying in the system that you use?
Yeah, so what happens, yes. So what I would say is that it's funny because when I've done my Vedic charts, I have an interesting Mars in my chart. And this conversation about conflict and that understanding of that conflict is not a bad thing. And there's something about Mars exists there's a purpose behind that.
Mm.
And I always say conflict paves way for growth. And so, yes, I would say that there's definitely a similarity in those types of themes that we would see. Again, just the difference between the Vedic side and the Western side is where Mars and Uranus will be in the Vedic chart is different than the Western chart.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
what's also interesting, and this is something that I share not from a perspective again of fear, but just from patterns and cycles. When was the last time Uranus was in the sign of Gemini? You were looking at the 1940s. What was happening in the 1940s? There was a major disruption on the planet.
How so?
And well, World War II.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have and I'm not saying that that was created from a Mars Uranus conjunction. What I'm saying is that Uranus is back in a sign that it hasn't been in for 84 years. The last time it was there, there was major upheaval on the planet.
Mm.
And although the war started while Uranus was in the sign of Taurus, what's happening is that we just have to pay close attention to these patterns and be aware of them.
Where is it right
Eh,
now?
In Gemini,
Oh,
it
it's already
actually
in
entered.
Gemini.
Yeah, it entered
Oh.
Gemini officially. We had a sneak preview. It was in Gemini for a little bit, retrograded into Taurus. I'm just looking at the calendar. April 25th, Uranus, I believe, entered Gemini officially for its I call it its extended stay.
And
It'll be
before
there for
that,
a
what
bit.
was it in? Taurus?
It was in Taurus, yeah, which had a lot to
So
do with our
actually, you're
financial.
kind of right because you said the last con like in the 40s it started when it was in Taurus, right? And then went into
Hmm.
Gemini. And a
Hmm.
lot of a lot of like professors or people who look at I don't watch the news. I left news 5 years ago and I haven't watched
Me
it
too.
since, yeah.
We're
And I was
we're in the
like
same
on the
boat.
front line of every story.
Yeah.
And I don't know now and but when I say I don't watch the news, I think a lot of people go, yeah, me too. But they don't realize that I mean, I don't get the news. It's not in my
Yeah.
algorithm. It's not on YouTube. It's not on
Yeah.
Instagram, like nothing. But I saw I think it was on Instagram, a famous professor who does he predicts like what's going to happen. He's been always right, apparently, for the last like 5, 6 years. And he says we've already entered, as of early this year, World War III. It's going to be one of those things where it's like a 30-year thing. It's not like a big sudden boom as we've
Yeah.
seen in the past. So maybe we did actually enter it, as you said, like Uranus in Taurus going into Gemini.
Yeah. And that's when it happened. And so it's that World War II started when Uranus was in Taurus. But I love studying history, and we can look at the history of the 1930s and what was happening around the world. And there was a buildup that was unfolding. Um, and it's very possible. Like I don't, again, not to spread the fear of it, is there a potential for this to be? Yeah, there's definitely a potential. Like whenever I see Uranus and Mars coming together, or when we see Pluto getting involved, it's an interesting. You just have to have your caution up and be like, "Oh, well, this is interesting. Like,
Hmm.
what's happening here?" Um, that's a day where you want to be careful driving your car. Like, be careful of road rage. Be careful of accidents. Be careful of sharp objects. Like, that's Mars energy. Accidents can happen as well. Be careful of conversations that we're having with each other. It could lead to, we might think it's not that big of a deal and it ends up being a full blowout and it creates a family war. It creates a breakdown in the system of the
Mm.
family or a relationship, whatever it might be, like at a personal level. And then, like I said, at a global level, macro level, there's definitely something happening here. I mean, the last time Neptune was in Aries was back around the Civil War in the US. Like we're dealing with these major planetary cycles, um, and they have purpose. To think that we have Uranus in Gemini, which is since World War II, Neptune in Aries since the Civil War, Pluto in Aquarius since the Revolutionary War.
Mm.
What type of change are we being initiated into? And why? And this is pushing ourselves at a very personal level to understand more deeply. Like, one concept that I love is the idea of enlightened self-interest. And there's something about it that really, in order for us to have the greatest impact in the world, we really have to, I don't want to say the word master, but master the self. To know thyself is the best way that you're going to be able to make an impact in the world.
What happens when a guy chasing freedom stumbles into the most glamorous and magical circle in Calabasas? Witches of Calabasas is my debut novel, and it's a world of hidden powers, opulent illusions, and the price of unchecked ego. Honest, seductive, and impossible to put down. It's available for pre-sale right now, and I'll put the link to Barnes& and Noble in the description. I think, you told your client today who asked you like when will there be peace? Obviously, she wants the answer of like in the chart, when does it show?
Yes,
Is
exactly.
that
That's what she
something that
wanted.
you can give, number one? And then number two, okay, well, first answer that, and then I'll tell
Yeah,
you.
it's such a difficult question because I feel like it's like one of those existential questions that I don't think there's a transit where it's peace. Like there are transits
Right.
where we could see maybe a peace agreement, but I don't think the piece that question is being proposed at, I don't think there's a time in that sense where it's like, boom, like this is what it is. Like I was looking at the charts of like 2000, it was like 2685 because that's when the north node of Pluto is going to enter Cancer. Oh, sorry, that's when we have a major shift with Cancer in the Pluto's north node. Sorry. And I looked at this and I was like, it's so interesting to think that over that's 600 plus years. Like what we're
Mhm.
going through collectively on this planet, there is a shift from a patriarchal way of systems to shift towards a more matriarchal way of systems. But
Mhm.
what's happening is we're in this huge collective shift that we're going through. Um, and I don't think peace works. I think it sounds sensational. It sounds
Yeah.
glamorized.
Yeah,
And
because you're right. I mean, look, even in the most enlightened age, there's still a little bit of that war or darkness or whatever
yeah,
it is. I mean, if we think of like Atlantis that people are always talking about, well, that was allegedly a war that brought them down and greed and
yeah,
whatever else. But, which I want to ask you about past lives next, but I think your answer to her was so perfect, and I don't want to brush over it in case people are listening because
yeah,
I, th- I had somebody on the show once he teaches a course in miracles, which is like my favorite practice.
yeah,
And uh, I remember being absolutely astonished. I didn't say anything because I wanted to be respectful to my guests, but in my mind, just being so astonished that one of the biggest teachers in the world on this topic has it completely wrong and is teaching this to so many people. His example was that oneness meant this, that he said, I can look at Bill Gates and think, oh, he's so greedy and and he's doing all these evil things. But then I have to look at myself and say, where am I being greedy in my life? That was his thing. So
Yeah.
finding commonality, having grace for somebody, that's not unity. Self
Yeah, no.
unity in the self-realization way that you're describing it is that there are no others. It was
Correct.
like they asked, I think it was Ramana Maharishi or Gandhi or somebody, and really fast, a reporter, as he was taking off on a train, said, how should we treat others? And he said, there are no others. And what he's
Yes.
saying is that all these are dead bodies. These are just vegetations. They're
Yes.
illuminated by consciousness. And it's
Bingo.
not your consciousness and my consciousness and it is just consciousness. There's the
Exactly.
one consciousness that's just there, and there's nothing else that can be said to exist. But in our
I-
ignorance and in our bondage, we see, like, I think right now I'm interviewing Richard James, and my name is Frank, or Firas is my first
yes.
name, but we're not talking. A conversation is happening. Consciousness is having a conversation. A
Yeah.
conversation is happening.
Yes. And I think that right there is so beautifully said, and that is the ignorance and the separation is what is causing
And it runs
the
so deep that a spiritual teacher is teaching it the wrong way to masses.
100%. And in when when started to study more deeply evolutionary astrology, one of the things to be so aware of is just that not every like that is a moment where
Mm,
he's teaching, but it's also like that moment where we realize that even the teacher is not always right. There's a moment where some of the self-proclaimed spiritual gurus and teachers or whoever it is are not who we think they are. But that is a part of their journey. That's that individual's journey that they're going through,
yeah.
in which there's a distortion. And that is it, to me, what you described is that distortion. And that takes that lifetime. Like that has is being worked on in this life.
Mm. Oh, so
And
you would look
so
at the chart and kind of, what would you say to somebody? Would you point it out, or would you just lead them in the right direction of where their strengths are? How do you do that?
it depends. So it totally
Mm,
depends on the person that I'm sitting. I always like to say like it's a felt energy when I sit down with somebody. Like how receptive are you? It's like
mm,
how receiving will you be of the information that I'm going to share? I've had to give very tough readings to people, or I have to be very like brash and bold, not from
mm,
the perspective of being mean, but in order for me to, because there's so much defensiveness that
mm,
sometimes it's almost like when I've done a reading, I've had to bring something up and be like, listen, we need to look at this. Like, this is how it is. This is what we're looking at because it like cracks that sort of exoskeleton that is blocking the soul
mm.
from being able to dive deeper. Um, and so with someone like that, it would depend on their level of understanding and receptivity because you can't convince somebody who's already strong in their own conviction. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
If that person thinks they're 100% right, then that means you're wrong in their eyes.
Mm,
And it doesn't serve us good to try to convince somebody that is already in belief that what they believe is true is the truth. When that's their opinion. I look at truth like there's I look at like ultimate truth, which is what you were just talking about, that idea of unity consciousness. And then there's like truth, the lower T truth, which is essentially just people's opinions. And so it's almost like how receptive is that person going to be when I share this? And you'll find, like for me personally, when somebody has a very strong ninth house or they have a strong Sagittarius chart, those are some tough cookies to crack. There's a
mm.
lot going on there. And that's not a fault. It's not a bad thing. It's
Yeah, it's
just
not bad
there's
or
like
good. Yeah.
it's like a mental defense system where it's like, I'm not going to believe everything anyone tells me because I actually think that what I think is true is the truth. So it takes a while, and that's why Gemini teaches us curiosity. That's the polarity to Sagittarius, to be open, to be curious.
There's something
And
so beautiful about what you're saying too, because I remember even in that interview, for example, thinking like maybe this is so perfect because everything is consciousness that he needs to be a certain way for me to realize certain things. Like, for example, that
oh,
lesson of
yeah,
don't try to change anybody, don't try to convince anybody. Like maybe I would not be able to learn that lesson without certain people to show that.
A
So
thousand
we're
percent.
all mirrors for each other in such a beautiful way. Like, there have been actual I have like a weekly Sunday class that I do, and one of the students was like complaining about this other teacher who does exactly the same method as him, but is teaching it the wrong way and not in integrity and whatever else he was saying. And I said,
Yeah,
but look how beautiful, because maybe that person will reach so many people that they now are more interested in a certain topic that they go and explore it themselves. Or maybe that teacher, like there's so many reasons how this could look, why it
thousand
might be a
percent.
very beautiful thing.
1,000%. I agree 100%.
Mm,
That is looking at every moment as an opportunity for us to learn and grow. And I mean, that's one of my things that I always say in my 20s. I learned very clearly that I had to learn to let the people that I love the most fail and make mistakes
mm,
because my perception was my perception. And it was such a beautiful lesson for me because it was a cure, it was a medicine, it was painful, but it was a cure. I felt free because I can't control I have no say. And that's why like when people say like, oh, like I can cleanse you of your karma or I can do this for you, and it's like that's not how this works.
mhm, mhm.
But there's an awareness that you drew, and that's what's so powerful. And I think that's like those learning moments that are so juicy that
Hmm.
you can look back and be like, I learned this because of this. And even though it was in a way that I was not expecting to learn the lesson, it was a beautiful lesson to learn because now how I view things or how I approach things or how I understand things is going to be different because of this moment.
I've this for anybody going through a hard time or cycles that might be difficult. This is kind of why I want to talk about this part. But I currently I've always learned and had these, like you said, juicy downloads, like these massive
Yeah,
life shifts, always after a crisis, always, always. The ending of a 17-year friendship, whatever else. Right now, my cat might be dying. I'm not sure. It's been like 3 months now of
yeah,
this thing that I don't know what to do about it. But she doesn't eat. She'll eat like 1 or 2 days a week, and it's like even then, it's like a little bit of a treat. I mean, it has not been easy, and the interesting thing is, though, she's teaching me in ways that I was like, holy crap, I thought I was the healer. It turns out this whole time
yeah,
you were the shaman, you know? Like,
always.
so literally will just like walk through a dream of mine. I have dreams that are psychic dreams. So, like,
Okay.
I called my dad once, your dad's gonna die tomorrow. He died the next day. I told my neighbor she was pregnant. I was like 12, you know? Like, these
Yeah,
things, dreams is how I get a lot of information. And she'll literally just lately will just walk through a dream and just like, and then lead me down a different way, and just like show
yeah,
me things. And one of the things was that, so I come from a lineage where, I know you grew up Catholic. I come from, there's a lot of Catholics in Lebanon where I'm from, but I grew up it's called Druze, Druze. It's a very
uh,
mystical, small minority in Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. And for us, like past lives was not even just like a belief. It was concrete. It was laser
yeah.
focused. Like your mom's name in your last life was so and so. She lives in that town over there. Like, and they wouldn't do that unless they saw you were struggling, like you were remembering. Like, I had a cousin who would
Something.
only wear military uniforms until he was like 8. And they were
Yeah.
like, oh, they found out he was a general. He was in this even secret militia group. He knew his
Oh,
code
wow.
name. He remembered his code name in that group, and
I
also
love.
everybody else that was still alive from that life.
Yeah,
He knew all their code names, and he was like 6. Like it was like it was just not even a belief. It was a very concrete thing. They could tell you where
yeah.
you came from, what village. But, so I always understood it in that way. But from my cat passing, one day I just suddenly had the realization I've had many impact. If we have to realize beyond the entertainment of, oh, I was Cleopatra, I was
Oh my God.
Alexander the Great. Oh
Yes.
my God, they drive me crazy, people.
Me too.
Like,
Me
the
too.
story of the theatrics of it all. I was in
Totally.
Atlantis. Okay, cool. Like, so what,
I,
And
I,
but
it's so fun. I get
yeah,
that all the time, and I
yeah,
squash that bug real quick. And I'm like, listen, I was like, we don't have like, let's be real for a minute. Like, let's look at human history.
yeah,
Do you really think every single person was Cleopatra and every single
right,
person had
right.
was doing it's just not, it's not
Yeah,
real.
yeah, it's not
Human
real.
history, there's trauma, there's pain, there's hurt, there's
Yeah,
suffering, there's
yeah,
so much that has happened on this planet.
yeah,
Chances are, it was the polar opposite situation. You were not the king or the queen. You were probably
Her
struggling or
handmaid or
suffering
something.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like there's so many different things. And but even with animals, animals are so beautiful because I have so many stories very similarly of animals that I feel connected to that I know are past life experiences.
Yeah.
So much so like you can't make up the circumstances and how everything comes together.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. I mean, yeah, and I'm sure you have examples, but one point I wanted to say too is that, and this goes into your mom passing as well,
yeah,
in your 20s, because you said that, from big struggles and crisis, you get
yeah,
awareness. You know, I I I called my mom after seeing what was going on with my cat, and because we come from this lineage, I said, Mom, if reincarnation is a reality, which my guru from a non-dual, he's a Maharaj, and he would have said, um, whatever your concept at death will be your experience. If you believe in heaven and
yeah,
hell, that will be your experience. If you believe in reincarnation, that will be your experience. All of it needs to be transcended. So now I've let go of all of that. But I said to her, I said, Mom, if reincarnation is the experience that we're having, then that would mean that I've had hundreds, maybe thousands of moms. I don't know who they are now. I could walk by one down the street and I don't know her. And yet
yeah,
I grieved her at one point. So why would I be overly attached to the form of my cat, to the form of you as my mother? And to her credit, she was like, "You're right."
yeah.
She's like, "You shouldn't be because you're
Yeah.
right."
It's really tough and what's my perspective on death and all of this has been completely transformed because of what I had gone through. And I feel like there is you definitely like again, I love also what your guru had said, which is the idea of what you believe when there is death, that is kind of what you will experience. Um, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people don't understand how important the journey of death is and how
Mhm.
it changes you. And it's all and the realizations that you're experiencing right now is part of the process of your cat going through what it's going through. And a lot of people can call it like anticipatory grief, which is the understanding that you know that your cat or a family member or a loved one is going to die. There's the knowingness that this is going to happen. It really cracks you open to
Mhm.
these perspectives. I want to add something to this. I say this sometimes to some people, and I think you'll appreciate this. But if you do, I believe in the idea of reincarnation. If you do believe in the idea of past lives, if you do believe that you've had many moms, just in this example,
Yeah.
that means you've had many different bodies.
Yeah. Mhm.
And and on Earth, right? So in the way that this world is designed, when a body when a body is dropped, the body is either buried or burned or something like this. That would mean that all of your past lives, all of those bodies are somewhere
Mm.
on this earth.
Mm. Mhm.
You could be walking and living in the same exact area where your old bones are buried or
Mm.
hidden or whatever. I think there's so much,
But
there's a
also, if
beauty,
somebody ate them, right? If like an
or
animal ate them and then
totally,
you ate that animal, like that could still be, you could be eating a
a
part
hundred
of your
percent,
old body.
100%. And there's such like an interesting,
Mm.
there's like an interesting, like I just, again, this is like a contemplation. Like I would sit with this idea. I feel like in a way, people are so afraid of it. People are afraid
Yeah,
of
yeah.
having these deeper. They say it's darker. I think it's lighter. I
Agreed.
feel like there's so much light to this. There's so much freedom in this. There's so much liberation in this. And I think with what you're experiencing and everything we're talking about, I say this all the time. What I feel right now in my heart, genuinely, is so much peace when it comes to everything that I have. Like I have a completely new perspective on a lot of what I went through. And truly, I think studying evolutionary astrology, studying consciousness, studying the soul journey, studying with different swamis and different monks and all of these different classes, it led me to a point where I felt so much peace and liberated. Where
Mm.
now I love talking about these things. Like I want to talk more.
Yeah.
I think it's such a I think now more than ever we need to talk about it
I love this
because
conversation. Yeah.
yeah, it needs to be brought up because people are afraid
Yeah.
and one day people that are listening will go through it. And it can be very challenging. It could feel like a crisis. But I want people to know that in that crisis, there's so much love and there's so much space for peace and there's so much opportunity for you to grow and expand your consciousness and understand things at a completely different level than you could have ever imagined. So
Mm,
don't run away from it. Don't be afraid of it. And I think it's about, like you said, having these conversations, even calling your mom up. What a beautiful thing that you can do that
hmm
and have that moment. I think is very, it's very lightful. I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for. It's like it's a feeling I feel, and it feels freedom. It feels like lightness.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I was on the phone with a friend the other day and I started to talk about reincarnation and this and that and like with these realizations. And he was like, Frank, I don't want to talk about this right now. He's like,
It's too much. Like,
and,
hang
yeah,
on. Like
and I was like,
I'm
okay.
because a lot of people, a lot of people are handling their own existential questions,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're like in their one area. But then there's some that are like, oh, I get it. I have friends that are like that too. They're like, Ricky, can you just let's just not today. Like
yeah,
let's not
yeah,
go down that rabbit hole right now. And
yeah.
I'm like, okay. I was like, but I need to talk about this someday soon. So
Yeah. It's hard. No, a lot of people are they just want to sweep it under the rug too, and I get it, but my perspective is just always that like if I live in California in the mountains. If there's a bear or a mountain lion or something, you're probably gonna die if it wants to kill you, but you would at least run and give yourself a chance. And so to know death is there, it's coming. It's gonna happen.
yeah,
Give yourself a chance now. Don't wait until your deathbed to start asking these questions.
a
Die
thousand
before
percent,
you die.
100%. I love that. A billion
Yeah.
percent. I think our relationship with death is so flawed. I write a lot of poetry myself, and one of my favorite poems that I wrote is the idea that death is our friend. And it's almost like this is not a scary thing. It's not meant to be scary. It's the conditioning, it's the Saturn stuff that makes us afraid.
Wow.
It's the Saturn realities and the dogma and the programming and the conditioning that causes us to believe certain things. And
Yeah.
I think because it's a mystery to so many people, it's almost like I don't want to do that. You having Venus exalted in your eighth house is beautiful because you're like, there's a love that you have for that world, for
Yeah.
the occult, for the esoteric, for the mysteries. And that's something you're here to do.
Speaking
But
of,
not
could
everyone
we
is.
that might change in the Western chart. Do you mind if we take a little look?
Yeah, so I have your chart here, and
Okay.
what is really interesting is I do have Venus in Gemini in your eighth house in your chart.
Oh,
I
so it
have you
stayed
as
in the eighth house either way.
yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Just probably a change of signs in your Vedic chart.
Yeah,
You
it's
probably have
Taurus in
Venus in
my Vedic.
Taurus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting, if we could just talk about Venus and Gemini for a minute, what's interesting is that Venus has a dual rulership in astrology.
Hmm.
She rules Taurus and she rules Libra. What's really interesting is that Venus in Taurus has a lot to do with what I like to call our self relationship. It is how we relate to ourselves. So normally an individual that has Venus in Gemini, I think I might have given this example earlier when I talked about Gemini, is there is a desire within Gemini to learn. Venus in Gemini loves mental stimulation. She loves in the eighth house, that stimulation for you comes through the occult,
Hmm.
comes through the mysteries. It's something where you are going to go through various moments in your life where you want to learn, you want to dive deeper, I want to figure things out. It's going to be very exciting for you to become curious about all these different things. Eventually, you reach a point where you start to weave through all of that to be able to say, well, that's not good, that's not good, that's not good, that's not good. Because Gemini can become so scattered. Venus and Gemini is learning how to become more of that bigger picture, being able to see beyond all of the details, right?
Mm.
And so, what happens with Venus in the self relationship is that if we relate to ourselves in a specific way, that creates a frequency and a vibration. That frequency and that vibration is then emanated or projected into the external world. That's the Libra side of Venus. And so what happens is that when you have Venus in Gemini, if we are in a scattered way, I don't know who I am. I'm trying to figure myself out. I'm trying to learn all of these different things to try to figure myself out. What ends up happening is we can start attracting so many different paths and not really knowing where I'm going, we can get lost.
Hmm.
And so there's something very beautiful about Venus and Gemini that is, like I said, is going from looking at the forest and being like, well, that's a tree, that's a tree, that's a tree, that's a tree. Venus and Gemini is aspiring to go above it all, like a drone,
It's
to
so crazy you say
see
all
the
this
bigger
because this
picture.
is so exactly everything that's been my life, where I was probably digging 100 different holes in spirituality and like every form I've gone through it, the light, the dark, the occult, the spiritual, the Mother
100%.
Teresa and the Gandhi and the
Yes.
Buddhism and the like all of it I've done. And then I had the non-dual experience, that was more powerful
Yeah.
than any ayahuasca. I've done like 30 ayahuasca ceremonies, more than any possible ceremony you can imagine, just privately in my room, spontaneously, that it was like, shoom, and now
Yeah.
I can look at the most powerful names in spirituality and just go ignorant, ignorance, ignorance. And then I can go truth, truth, truth. Like I just know immediately. And I'm just like one hole instead of 100.
And that's the gift. That's like such the gift of this experience for you. And you also are a Scorpio rising in your Western chart.
Hmm.
So in the natural zodiacal wheel, the eighth house is also a Scorpio house. So you kind of got like a double Scorpio-esque like energy here for you.
Hmm.
Your natural instinct is very deep and penetrative. Like that's just who you naturally are, there's a desire for the soul to confront itself in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of what you're going through. And so all of those different paths that you tried walking, they were all in attempt to confront the soul, only realizing that those were exhausting those desires. It was exhausting your desire to learn this, to go do this, to go do this. It exhausted it to the point then you realize I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
So what is it that I need? And that is where the chart starts opening up more. And that's where we're starting to tap into the deeper part of your Pluto. Your Pluto was in the first house in this lifetime. And so what happens is your Pluto was also retrograde. And a lot of people sensationalize retrograde cycles. Pluto retrograde is super common. Half the planet pretty much has Pluto retrograde because it retrogrades for 5 to 6 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But Pluto in the first house is really important because what that tells us is that the soul's deepest unconscious way of finding security is within oneself. This is a very strong independent energy that happens here, which is ironic because in your Western chart, you have like, I think 4 planets or 3 or 4 planets in your seventh house of relationships and
In
connections and
Western,
partnerships
in
and
Vedic
marriages.
as well. In Vedic, it's Jupiter, Mercury, and the sun.
And that's kind of a contradiction in a sense. They're diametrically opposing each other. Pluto in the first house, there's a level in this lifetime of the soul that craves a level of independence, autonomy. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to do
Yeah.
things. But then there's this whole other world
Yeah.
of relationships where relationships are probably your greatest teachers. They're like the idea that relationships could reflect to you parts of yourself where it's like you learned through those individuals just by them being in your life. You're like, oh wow, this is interesting. And there's something about Pluto in the first house that pushes you into relationships, magnetizing people into your life. It's a
Romantic
huge,
relationships.
be it business, romantic, or
Okay.
even a marriage.
So contractual relationships.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Somehow, some way, there would be something that, and it would be very karmic with the way that this chart is. When I say karmic, that means that there's lessons for the both of you. Could be unresolved lessons. It's like people that you could have dated or been contractually connected to is probably not your first time with them.
Yeah. It's so
And there are a
true.
lot of
Wow.
lessons with those souls that you're navigating, and it's because the deepest wound, the deepest unconscious, the thing about Scorpio in general too is I don't trust. I've been betrayed, I've been lied to, I've been whatever it might be. So
Hmm.
I'm naturally, especially a Scorpio rising, is not going to open up easily.
Hmm.
And it's because of those trusts, it's because of the betrayal, it's because of all of that. And what I'm learning how to do is I'm actually learning to come out of the Scorpio world, which is so deep. And there's a big part of you, it's ironic being a Taurus, is to have fun. Enjoy a little bit. Enjoy a little bit of the, like, bring that depth that you have into the world that you're living in and enjoy it. And that means connecting with people, meeting people, because it's very easy for you to be alone. Your moon is also in your 12th house.
I
So it's
know.
like,
Oh, wow. In
you're,
in Western as well?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's the only thing that's going to change is your signs. And so
Oh, oh, okay.
so the moon in the 12th house is interesting because A lot of astrologers have a negative perspective of the moon in the 12th house. I think that's where you get a lot of your dreams from. I think that's where maybe lucid experiences can
Mhm.
come up. Like all of those types of themes come from this moon in your 12th house. Um, but it also shows me that your comfort zone, not comfort zone, what makes you feel the most secure or safe in this world is going to be when you're with yourself or when you're in communion, or you're in this space to be that conduit for source, to be in this position where I can feel my connection with the divine. And like that level of connection is where you probably feel the best.
Mhm.
And it's challenging because there's a push in this lifetime where relationships are important for you.
Mhm.
So it's like, I just want to be alone. But it's like, but there's also this other part of me that I know relationships are important. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, wow. To look at it from that perspective is so interesting. I've never seen it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
And
know what's interesting too is like I've had two different Vedic astrologers that both on the show. One of them was like, you're going to be in a relationship with this massive figure, like the
because of
contractual, whatever,
Jupiter.
Jupiter, Sun,
Yeah. Yeah.
to get, in the seventh house. And they're like, this is going to be like a kingly figure because the sun is the king in a chart, right? And
Yeah.
then they said, and then another one was like, you're never going to be in a relationship in this life, not a serious one. Like you, and I was like, wait, so who's right?
Right. What's interesting is that like what I would say is that I'm very conscious. I would not put the word um yes, Jupiter can be kingly, but in fact, what I would say is sometimes Jupiter can even just manifest as somebody from a different culture or a different
Mm,
experience than
mhm,
you, a
mhm,
different country than you, somebody that's exotic or different from where you're from, somebody that is foreign is Jupiter as well. So it could be somebody that is different or foreign from you. But what I would say is that the lesson of this, the sun, I wouldn't say is necessarily going to be the king. For me, I would say is that a healthy relationship for you is a relationship in which you don't lose yourself.
mm, mhm,
And what happens is if the sun is our vital force and has elements of identity, the sun could then say that part of my identity comes from my connections. And so there's something about this that would speak that I need to make sure that I harness such a personal power from within that when I'm in a relationship with somebody, they don't take that away from me. And I
mm,
don't lose myself, or I feel like they come into my orbit, or I'm trying to fix them or get into their orbit. Like that's something you're craving a level of self-reliancy within your relationships. You're craving a level of like I love you, but like leave me alone.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that type of dynamic here.
Mhm,
Um, the other thing I would say is that chances are with Jupiter here, you may show up in the relationship in which you might be a wisdom sharer, somebody that can share wisdom with their partner. It might not be somebody who's at the same level of knowledge that you're at. It
mm.
might be somebody that you are going to bring this wisdom to.
Oh, not the other way around because Jupiter is teacher.
Correct. And so what happens is that there's what happens. You also have your Juno, which is your asteroid for marriage and partnership, in
Oh,
your seventh house as well. So like you
I've never
need
heard of this. Juno?
is an asteroid, yeah.
Wow,
No, we don't use Vedic
that's so
astrology doesn't
unique.
use asteroids. Yeah, they're
Wow,
called the asteroid goddesses. There's many of them, and she's
wow.
one. And that talks about
And I
partnership
have that
styles.
in the seventh house of marriage.
Yes, which means you need a relationship that is very like the acts of service and the balance between the both of you has to be like on par. There cannot be a power struggle. There cannot be I do this, you do this. Like there can't be a I make more money than you. That's not going to work well with you at all. Like
Mhm,
you're going to need somebody that is able to see you eye to eye, and all of that is kind of like stripped away, and we're a team on what you guys do. Whatever that is, it's we're a team, and this is how we do it.
mhm.
Um, but it's interesting because, like I said, I could see a lot of people telling you that Sun Jupiter, like, oh, you're going to meet this very powerful person. I actually feel like that is a stereotype of that type of a
Right.
transit.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I feel like, especially in your Western chart with Venus and Gemini and your Mercury is conjuncture Juno, I would be open to somebody that is maybe creative, like a writer or an author or somebody that is in these creative spaces would be interesting for you.
Hmm.
Um, but I would not put a description like a kingly person, or I get people all the time like, oh, you're gonna marry a famous person. I was born with Jupiter and Leo, and I get told that all the time, like, oh, the person you're gonna be with. is going to be like an actor and or actress, and this is what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And I was like, that's just not that's not even like a thing in the chart. When I see it, I would never say that for myself.
Uh,
But it's because people relate it so quickly to the fact that you have a conjunction between these two planets. This is why it's going to be this specific way. Um, I can't see that. But what I would say is that relationships are needed for this chart. Relationships are super important. Um, and that there is a person in this world for you, depending upon how much you desire to grow. Uh,
mm,
there is someone in the world that is looking for someone like you and has that desire for growth. I say this because I meet so many people that are like, when am I going to meet my one and only? And I was like, I don't believe in that. I don't agree with that mentality.
oh, so
I
you won't give transits of like, oh, next year when this happens, you'll find someone.
We could talk about it from that perspective, yes. Like,
Oh,
this is an
okay.
opportunity to date. This is an
Okay.
opportunity for you
I like that you look at
to,
windows of opportunities, how you call it. I
yes.
love that about your style.
And that's because the reality is that if your energy is not craving partnerships romantically. The seventh house could actually bring you massive business opportunities, business connections, business partnerships. That is a window of opportunity for you. So it's like, I like to get to know what it is that you want, and then we can look at where the transits are unfolding and
Hmm.
how you can understand the momentum that's around you right now. But again, I've had clients meet people outside of like a Venus transit or a Jupiter transit or something like that. Like it's so much more complex. And I
Mm,
just want people to be careful of thinking that there's only one person for them. The idea of like soulmates or anything like this, like all of these terms, I think keep us so stuck. And I think it really comes down to how much do you desire to grow? There is a person that exists for you that
mm,
can help kind of catalyze that growth with you. And like that's how I look at things. It's almost like it's available for all of us because I have a client that's like, I'm so afraid of being alone for the rest of my life because that's what people told me. And I was like, what an awful fate that someone would bestow that upon you. Like that is such bad karma.
wow.
Like
Yeah.
who could ever like to put that seed of consciousness in someone else's brain? That's hurtful. That's painful. That's a karmic dynamic that's kind of like I'm essentially conditioning that soul to think and to believe that they're going to be alone. That's
Mm-hmm,
not fair.
hmm.
I have clients that have major seventh house difficulties like Pluto's and Saturn's or Uranus, and they're very happily married. It might not have been easy, but they're married and they have a happy marriage now. So I'm very conscious of those types of thoughts that people say, um, and how they say certain things. I want to set you up for success while also keeping it real with you and be like, hey, just letting you know, this is what's happening right now. Like
Mm,
for you, for an example, Chiron is going to enter Taurus this year. You're going to have Chiron coming into your little Taurus stellium in your seventh house. That can be incredibly healing for you. That could be a chapter of deep relational healing, your relationship template. You might discover a part of what you didn't know that you needed, that now I know what I do need, and that
mm.
opens up a door for you to meet somebody.
When does that happen? When is Chiron?
Chiron comes in June. Chiron comes into Taurus in June. You'll have a little bit to go. I would say 2020. I'd have to look at the ephemeris exactly to get the exact date for you, but I want to say 2027, 2028 is when you're going to start feeling some of that energy in your seventh house.
Mm.
Um, but then a lot of people will look at Chiron and say, this is awful. I can't believe you're working with Chiron. Like, that's wounds and pain. And I'm like, but it's really in how you view things. I really do believe it's all in the angle of how you perceive things. And it's as simple as you change your perspective, you can change your entire life. Like, I truly believe that.
Wow. Yeah. How is there anything you want to say, anything else about my chart before I?
Any questions you have, I can, anything at all, anything that's coming to you that
Well, I
you're
guess
curious about.
my cat kind of right now is something I'm really is on my mind. I
Yeah.
had a retreat that I canceled last month. Didn't go to my friend's bachelor party. Like I'm just not wanting to leave her. And I have a wedding in 2 weeks in Maui. I'm like, do I go? Do I cancel?
You have the North Node right now. Transit North Node is in your fourth house, which is in the home and family department. what's happening at home, what's happening in your emotional body, what are we feeling, what's going on. And so that's interesting that we have this. Um, did you notice the decline, like specifically happen? Like you said, it's been a little bit though, right? You said it's
It's been
been
about through 2 months, 2 to 3, and maybe 3. And it was like she stopped eating. I took her to the doctor. They drained the fluids. She was fine. Then it started again. They said she
yeah,
had a mass around her heart. And I chose not to do like chemo,
the
radiation, all that. I'm
surgery.
just like
Yeah,
giving her the happiest life she can have.
exactly. What's interesting as well for those that are listening, you can also do astrology on your pets if you know their birthdays and when they're
Mm,
born. You can also pull
I wish I had
your
that info.
yeah, you could totally pull your pet's charts. What I would say is in February and March we had some eclipses. We had an eclipse on February 17th and March 3rd. That's why I'm asking for that timeline to see if it coincided
It
with the
does. It
eclipses.
does. Yeah.
So what I would want to see is, traditionally when there is something health related around the eclipses, it is serious. It's a big deal. I always say around eclipses, take our health seriously and make sure we prioritize it because during eclipses, it's almost like portals where those that are close to crossing over tend
Mm,
to have like that bridge is open, if I
mm,
could say it in that way, where souls could cross over during eclipses. And I find in my personal practice, I have a lot more conversations around death and loss and grieving around eclipses.
mm.
Um, Even relationships too. But so I'd be very curious. By the way, the next set of eclipses are in August. It's August 12th and August 27th, 28th, depending on what coast you're on. So that may be interesting just to kind of put that on your marker because this started for you back in February and March.
Mm-hmm.
But the North Node is in your fourth house right now, so that definitely could bring up themes around what's happening in your home, what's happening in this department. Normally, the North Node brings things into your life, and I don't know if even in your brain right now you're thinking about bringing any new lovely
Yeah.
animals into your world.
I don't think I ever will again, to be honest.
And that'll be interesting as the North Node goes through this part of your chart. This also could translate to moves. This
Yes,
could
moving.
translate
I'm
to
looking at places right now. Yeah.
this is a part of the transition process. This
Yeah.
will be a part of it all. So we could totally see the North Node in your fourth house generating a move. We could also see work opportunities and almost changing at the same token for you. With the South Node in your 10th house, there can be shifts for you that are unfolding for you in your work and your career as there's a focus on your home, focusing more on spending time at home,
Yeah.
focusing on something to do with your home and your house or wanting to move, or even your cat. Yeah, we could totally see that. Um, in so in that it would be a more emotional chapter. But I would never predict like death, for an example, or when
Right.
someone's going to cross over.
Yeah. 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 I've heard a lot of astrologers say that as well, that
Yeah.
they don't do that. Yeah.
There are techniques of planets that you can look at that indicate a difficult health transit for somebody, but you would never get in. I think there's something ethical in that world as well about getting
Yeah.
into that space.
Yeah. 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 I've taken up so much of your time, and I just want to say thank you because this has
Of
been,
course.
I'm so glad that we did this.
Me too.
And I mean, hopefully we'll do it again. Maybe anytime there's like a really massive transit, we can come on and talk about it. But
I'd love
it's
to. I
been
appreciate
beautiful.
you.
Yeah,
That
me
definitely.
too.
I loved this. I had so much fun, so I appreciate you so much for inviting me to do this.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful. I had so much fun.
And how can people find you if they want to book a reading?
So if you'd like to book a reading, you go to richardjamesastrology.com. I'm also on Instagram, which is Richard James Astrology. And if you are a Gaia fan, you can also go to Gaia and watch Starcast Weekly and learn more about my approach to astrology week over week. It comes out every Sunday, and helping us understand kind of these rhythms that are unfolding every day, every week.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I'll make
Yeah,
sure those links are all in the description, of course, to make it easy.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
All right,
appreciate you so
Richard or
much.
Ricky, thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.